Okay, so let's start by doing the prayers, and then after the prayers we'll do some meditation. And while reciting the prayers,
we wanted to see that first.
just mentally, it's okay. While reciting the prayers, you can imagine in the space in front of you the Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, and imagine he represents all other objects of refuge, all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, all the spiritual teachers, the gurus of the past and our own present gurus, and all objects of refuge represented by this figure of the Buddha in front. So as we take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, then feel that we are taking refuge in all the objects of refuge. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence, and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of all others to the great enlightenment. This ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Ratnam Mandalakam Niryatayami. So while we recite the mantra of the Buddha, imagine light flowing from the Buddha into yourself, and you can imagine it going to all other sentient beings everywhere in the universe. And the light fills our bodies and minds, purifying all negative karma and afflictions and suffering. So all suffering and the causes of suffering get purified. And the light also nourishes our positive qualities, our positive potential, so that those qualities can grow and develop more and more and eventually become enlightened qualities. Taya ta om mune mune maha mune soha. Taya ta om mune mune maha mune soha. Taya ta om Mahamanaye Soha Tayata Om Mune Mune Mahamanaye Soha. So take a few moments to generate the altruistic intention to benefit all living beings, helping them be free of suffering and the causes of suffering, helping them achieve happiness, genuine happiness, all the way up to the highest happiness of enlightenment. And to be able to do that, we ourselves need to become enlightened. So the Buddha achieved that state and then taught how to do it. We're really fortunate that we have the chance to learn these teachings, to learn about the path to enlightenment. So as you listen to this teaching tonight, do so with the motivation to develop your potential for enlightenment, your Buddha nature, and reach that state of enlightenment to be able to benefit all living beings. So we'll now do a meditation on the last 3 of the 9 points in the 9-point meditation on equalizing self and others from Trichang Rinpoche, His Holiness's junior tutor. So we already meditated on the first 6 points, and those points are related to conventional truth, how things appear to exist in our everyday reality. And the last 3 points are from the viewpoint of ultimate truth, how things are empty of inherent existence. So again, these points are to help us generate a sense of equality between ourselves and others, and stop having biased attitudes of thinking I am more important than others, and also thinking certain people are more important than others, my friends are more important than strangers and enemies and so on. And instead of that kind of attitude, seeing all living beings as equally deserving of our concern, compassion, kindness, and so on. Okay, so the first of these last 3 points is to contemplate that there are no inherently existing friends or enemies, meaning there's nobody who is a friend or an enemy or a stranger from their own side inherently. If that was the case, then the Buddhas would perceive them in that way. So if our enemies, the person we dislike, if that person was inherently existing as an enemy, then the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas would see that person as an enemy as well and would feel anger and aversion towards them. But that isn't the case. The Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas have equal compassion and love for all living beings. They don't see anybody as an enemy that they are negative towards. They also don't see anybody as a friend that they are attached to. So just spend a few moments thinking about that, how from the Buddhist point of view, and they understand reality. They see things as they really are. And in their perspective, everybody is equally deserving of love and compassion. And it could be helpful to bring to mind a specific person towards whom you do have negative feelings, and have a hard time feeling love and compassion for. And it's probably because of seeing that person as inherently bad. So think about how, from the Buddha's point of view, that isn't the case. The Buddha sees this person as dear and loving, worthy of love, deserving of love, as they see everybody else, every other living being. The next point is that if there were permanent, inherently existing friends, enemies, and strangers, then they would be like that forever and would never change. But in reality, people do change. A person who's very negative and harmful can become very positive and helpful, and vice versa. Somebody at one point in time can be a very nice person, but later change and become very nasty. So people change, and also relationships change. So someone who we regard as a friend, later we may come to see that person as an enemy, or as someone we are indifferent to, and so on. So this happens from one life to another, as Buddha pointed out, but it can also happen within one life. So just bring to mind one or more experiences you've had of this, where a relationship that you had with someone, and maybe you thought that relationship would last, would always be that way, but at some point it changed, either for the better or for the worse. And the third point, the last point here, is that clinging to permanent, inherently existing friends, enemies, and strangers is like having fixed ideas about this side and that side. So, for example, if we're standing on one side of the road, we call it this side, and then we say the other side of the road is that side. But if we cross the road, then that side becomes this side, and this side becomes that side. So we give labels to things depending on where we stand, depending on our perspective. The same happens with people. For example, if there's a person who has the same political views as oneself, we say this person is on my side or this side. And a person who has the opposite political views, we say that side, them over there. But these labels are not fixed and permanent because any of us might change our views. And in a similar way, we label I onto our own aggregates, our body and mind. So in relation to this set of aggregates, we say I. And then somebody else's aggregates, we say he or she or them or you. So we have other labels for other people's sets of aggregates. But from their point of view, each of those other people, they say I in relation to their aggregates, and they say you or she or he in relation to our aggregates. So this means that I and other and friend, enemy, stranger are just labels that depend on shifting circumstances and concepts, but they don't exist from their own side inherently. So if these ideas make sense to you, then see if you can make a resolution to keep them in mind and use them in your daily life, in your interactions with other people, the way you look at other people and feel about other people, in order to have a greater sense of equanimity or equality, as opposed to clinging to fixed ideas about I and other, and also friend, enemy, and stranger. Okay, so before we continue and look at new material, last week Steve had asked for an example of an acquired knowledge obscuration according to this school, because I had given some examples of acquired afflictive obscurations. So he wanted to know about acquired knowledge obscurations. So I dug something out from my notes. And so according to this school, the Yogacara Svatantrika Madhyamaka school, knowledge obscurations, these are obscurations to omniscience. They're also sometimes called cognitive obscurations. So they're the obscurations that prevent us from attaining Buddhahood, full enlightenment, omniscience. And so according to this school, these obscurations are mainly the conception of true existence, the conception that grasps at things as being truly existing. And this conception can occur with regard to different phenomena. So in the text, it actually does list different examples of this kind of conception. So just one example that's given is the conception of true existence that apprehends suffering aggregates as truly existent objects of utilization. That's a lot of words there, but just to make it simple. So suffering aggregates, for example, are aggregates, our body and mind. These are suffering because they are under the control of karma and delusion. They're samsaric aggregates, unlike the aggregates of a Buddha. So our own aggregates of body and mind are an example of suffering aggregates. And so there's a conception grasping suffering aggregates as being truly existing objects of utilization. In other words, they're things to use, things that we can use, and they're truly existing, truly independently existing. So that's just one of the examples given of a knowledge obscuration. And then it says that there are both acquired and innate versions of the knowledge obscurations. So I was thinking about that, and yeah, I didn't find detailed information, but just thinking about it on my own, I thought, so maybe the innate version of that is the one that we have life after life. As long as we're in samsara, as long as we're wandering, circling in samsara, we have this innate grasping at aggregates as truly existing. So when we come to the end of one life, there's this strong craving and grasping that comes up. We're leaving behind one set of aggregates. We're not happy about that. We want another one. So that's one of the main factors that keeps us in samsara. I want a new body. I don't want to disappear. And so I'm just guessing, that that's a part of our attitude about getting a new set of aggregates life after life. So that might be the innate version of that particular conception. And then for the acquired one, maybe it's the one we have with regard to the present aggregates. So our present body and mind, that our mind has been connected with since conception, right? From the moment of conception, our mind has been connected with this set of aggregates, and we innately have this grasping at aggregates as truly existing. But with regard to this particular set of aggregates, this is just with this lifetime. We didn't have this particular grasping last lifetime. Last lifetime, we were grasping at another set of aggregates. So this lifetime, we're grasping at this set of aggregates because this is what we have now. So maybe that's the acquired one. I'm just guessing, because I didn't find information, but, using my imagination, that's what I came up with. So again, the acquired levels of these obscurations, this kind of grasping at true existence, all the acquired ones are abandoned when we attain the path of seeing, all gone at one go. And then the innate ones are abandoned gradually over the path of meditation. Okay. Any other questions anyone would like to ask? Okay, so if questions do come up later, you can ask. So I made some slides for tonight. So we have been talking about the 10 topics of the first chapter of the Ornament. That chapter is about the exalted knower of all aspects, which is another term for omniscience or enlightened mind, Buddhahood. And so we've been going through those 10 topics. We have just one left in chapter 1. So the 10th topic is called Achieving of Definite Emergence. And the previous topic, number 9, was about accumulations. So how a bodhisattva accumulates the 2 accumulations or 2 collections of merit and wisdom. And so having done that, having accumulated those 2 collections, then one will definitely emerge to omniscience or to enlightenment. So this term definite emergence, it's the term that's usually used for renunciation, ngejung in Tibetan. So it's sometimes translated as renunciation, or another translation is the determination to be free. And so normally that term is used for the wish to get out of samsara, to see samsara as in the nature of suffering, and then generate this strong wish to be free, to definitely emerge from the suffering of samsara to liberation. That's the usual way that term is used. But here, it seems to be used in a somewhat different way, definitely emerging from an unenlightened state, not yet enlightened, not yet Buddha, to the state of full enlightenment, Buddhahood. So the definition of this particular topic is a yoga of the pure grounds that undoubtedly issues forth an exalted knower of all aspects. So again, the term yoga is referring to a mental practice, which is either calm abiding or a union of calm abiding and special insight. And then the pure grounds, that term refers to the last 3 of the 10 grounds, the 10 bhumis of a bodhisattva, the 8th, 9th, and 10th grounds. And I'm not completely sure why they're called pure grounds from the point of view of Svatantrika. According to Prasangika, just throwing in a little bit of Prasangika here, when a bodhisattva is on the last 3 grounds, 8th, 9th, and 10th grounds, the bodhisattva has already completely abandoned all the afflictive obscurations. There are no more afflictive obscurations. So ignorance, attachment, anger, and all the afflictions, their seeds, all of those have been completely abandoned. And the bodhisattva has only the knowledge obscurations left to purify. And those are not afflictions. Those are just the traces, the imprints, the leftovers, the bad smell, you can say, of the afflictions that are in their mind. Those are the only things left to abandon. And so from that point of view, the bodhisattva's mind is pure. There's no more afflictions on the 8th, 9th, and 10th ground. So that's according to Prasangika. But according to this school, according to, I think also the other, both sub-schools of Svatantrika, the bodhisattva on the last 3 grounds still has afflictive obscurations, because they're abandoning the afflictive obscurations as well as the knowledge obscurations on all the 10 grounds. So why would they be called pure grounds? According to Svatantrika, the bodhisattva's mind isn't completely pure at this time. But I did find in my notes from my teacher, he said that on these last 3 grounds, there's no manifest conception of true existence. So they haven't completely abandoned the conception of true existence. It's still there in their mind, but it never manifests. It never comes up in a manifest way, like on the surface. It always stays underground. So yeah, they have worked so much on overcoming the conception of true existence that it's always kind of underground or dormant and never manifest. Maybe that's the reason that these last three grounds are called pure grounds, because the conception of true existence never arises in a manifest way. And then, yeah, so this yoga of the pure grounds undoubtedly issues forth an exalted knower of all aspects. So the result of practicing on these final three grounds is enlightenment, Buddhahood, exalted knower of all aspects. So yeah, so this particular type of practice exists only on the three pure grounds, not before the 8th, 9th, and 10th grounds. And it has 8 divisions that can be understood either as objects to which one definitely emerges, or as practices that enable the bodhisattva to definitely emerge to enlightenment. So I'll just give you one example of one of these 8 divisions. It said that one of the practices that enables a bodhisattva to definitely emerge to enlightenment is a practice in which all phenomena are seen as being equal in being empty of true existence. So bodhisattva has very good understanding of emptiness at this point. I'm very familiar with emptiness, and they're able to see that all phenomena without exception are equally empty. There's nothing that isn't empty of true existence. So whatever phenomena there is, whatever phenomena that exists, whether it's impermanent or permanent, inside or outside, animate or inanimate, in samsara, in nirvana, whatever, all phenomena without exception are equal in being empty of true existence. So that's one of the practices included in this particular topic. Okay, so now we will move on to chapter 2, which is about the knower of paths. So knower of paths is the second of the clear realizations, the 8 clear realizations that are explained in the Ornament for Clear Realizations. So knower of paths. And the connection between the first and the second, first of the clear realizations is exalted knower of all aspects, which is enlightenment, and knower of paths is that exalted knower of all aspects is explained first in order to inspire people to want to attain it. So when people hear about exalted knower of all aspects, omniscience, Buddhahood, enlightenment, and they hear about all the wonderful qualities of that state, they will be enthusiastic, inspired to want to attain it. And so then this next main subject of the ornament is knower of paths. And so the purpose of this is to show that if you do want to attain enlightenment, then you have to cultivate all the paths. And remember, a path is a mind, a mental state, a realization, not just an ordinary mind, but a realization, a high realization. So bodhisattva, to become enlightened, has to develop many different kinds of paths. And these are not just bodhisattva paths. Of course, they have to develop bodhisattva paths, bodhisattva realizations, but they also have to cultivate the paths of hearers and solitary realizers. Those are the practitioners who aspire to attain nirvana for their own sake. So even though the bodhisattva, doesn't want to follow those paths, doesn't want to attain their goal, but a bodhisattva still has to develop in their mind those paths, because their goal, their ultimate goal, is to become a Buddha, to become fully enlightened Buddha. And the purpose of becoming a Buddha is to be able to help all sentient beings. So you have to be able to help sentient beings according to their dispositions, their interests, their inclinations. And some of those people, some of those beings will want to follow the hearer's path. Some will want to follow the solitary realizer's path. So you have to know those paths so that you can guide those particular disciples on those paths. So we'll look into that more as we go through this chapter. Also, this knower of paths, knowers is actually multiple, knowers of paths are the causes for enlightenment. So if a bodhisattva doesn't meditate thoroughly on all these different kinds of paths, then they won't be able to attain their goal of full enlightenment, Buddhahood. So there's a definition of knower of paths. It's a Mahayana Arya's clear realization conjoined with the wisdom directly realizing emptiness in the continuum of the person who possesses it in their continuum. Definitions are often like that for some reason, but we don't need to go into that. What we need to know here is that this particular realization, a knower of paths, exists in the mind of a Mahayana Arya. So Mahayana Aryas include bodhisattvas, bodhisattva Aryas, bodhisattvas who've gained the direct realization of emptiness, but it also includes Buddhas. Buddhas are also Mahayana Aryas because they have the direct realization of emptiness and they're on the Mahayana path, or well, they've finished the Mahayana path, but anyway, they're Mahayana. So there's two kinds of Mahayana Aryas, bodhisattvas and Buddhas. And so this is where knower of paths exists. So it's a clear realization, a path existing in the mind of either a bodhisattva Arya or a Buddha Arya. And then it says it's conjoined with a wisdom directly realizing emptiness. So a knower of paths can either be that wisdom, the wisdom directly realizing emptiness, or it could be another kind of mind that is conjoined with that wisdom. And this term conjoined, it did come up before, but just to remind you, it means, when one mind is conjoined with another mind, it means assisted by. So if mind A is conjoined with mind B, it means mind B assists, helps, supports, influences mind A. So for example, when an Arya, let's say an Arya Bodhisattva, is meditating and they're in a very deep state of meditative absorption on emptiness. So they're focused on emptiness, and it's a direct non-conceptual realization of emptiness. So at that time, the only thing actually appearing to their mind is emptiness. Nothing else appears. No conventional phenomena appear to their mind. But in their mind, in a non-manifest way, they have other qualities such as bodhicitta, great compassion, loving kindness, understanding of impermanence. So many different states of mind, many different realizations in their mind at that time, but they're dormant, non-manifest. And yet those non-manifest minds do influence their wisdom, meditating on emptiness. So for example, the whole reason that the bodhisattva is sitting there meditating on emptiness is because of their compassion and their love, their bodhicitta, they're totally dedicated to helping all living beings and dedicated to becoming fully enlightened to help all living beings. And that's why they sit down and meditate on emptiness, because that's one of the causes they need to develop to become enlightened. So even though bodhicitta, loving kindness, compassion are not manifest at that point in time when they're in meditation on emptiness, they're still flavoring their mind, affecting their mind, coloring their mind. So that's just an example of the meaning of conjoined. So their wisdom, directly realizing emptiness, is conjoined by bodhicitta, loving kindness, and compassion. And in a similar way, when they're out of meditation and they're acting in ways to help sentient beings, like practicing generosity and helping others and so on. So even though at that time their wisdom realizing emptiness isn't manifest, it's in a dormant, non-manifest state, but it's still affecting their minds. It's assisting their minds. It's helping them, remember that all these sentient beings that they are helping are empty of true existence, and all the activities that they're doing are empty of true existence, and so on. So that wisdom is still affecting their activities, their bodhisattva deeds. So that's the general meaning of a knower of paths. And where it exists is from the Mahayana path of seeing through the Buddha ground. Okay, so that's the starting point, the Mahayana path of seeing, when the Bodhisattva attains the first direct realization of emptiness, and they go all the way up through Buddha ground. So they continue to exist on the Buddha ground in the minds of Buddhas. And then the next point, this is a quotation from one of the Perfection of Wisdom sutras, the middling one, which I think is the 25,000 verse Perfection of Wisdom sutras, which says, the Buddha is talking to Subhuti, one of the disciples. He says, Subhuti, bodhisattvas should generate, in brackets, conceptually, whatever are the paths of hearers, whatever are the paths of the solitary realizers, and all the paths which are paths of the Buddhas. They should directly know all paths. So that's a sutra quotation confirming that the need for bodhisattvas to develop in their minds all the different kinds of paths, not just the paths leading straight to Buddhahood, but also the paths of hearers and solitary realizers. And they first develop these conceptually and continue to meditate on them, and then eventually have direct realizations of these paths. So Knower of Paths has 11 topics. Next slide. These are the 11 topics. And we won't go into all of them in detail. I'll just give a brief overview of them, and then we'll go into a few details of some of them. So basically, in a summarized way, we can say there's 3 types of knowers of paths. There's those that know hearers' paths, those that know solitary realizers' paths, and those that know bodhisattvas' paths. And so again, a bodhisattva is working to become enlightened, fully enlightened, to help all sentient beings. And to be able to help all sentient beings, they do need to know the different kinds of paths that you lead beings on. And it's not enough just to know intellectually these paths, like to know, oh, well, a hearer has to do this, but they don't meditate on that themselves. No, a bodhisattva has to generate in their own mind the same realizations that a hearer generates in their mind. So they have to actually have those realizations in their own mind as part of their own path. And when I was studying this, I wondered about, and you might wonder about this as well. It only mentions 3 types of beings: hearers and solitary realizers and bodhisattvas. But what about all the people in the world who belong to other religions? I mean, the biggest religion in the world is Christianity. I don't remember how many millions of people are Christians, but that's, the largest religion in the world, Christians, and I think number 2, maybe Muslims, Islam. But there are a lot of people who follow these other religions, and there's no mention of how a bodhisattva helps those kinds of people. One reason might be because most of these texts were composed in India, and the Nalanda masters maybe didn't know about these other religions. But on the other hand, there were people in India who had similar beliefs, who believed in some kind of creator God. The world and everyone and everything is created by a God, whether he's called maybe Brahma or Ishvara, some other name, but similar idea to the Abrahamic religions. And then the followers of those religions aspired for good rebirths, like being born in a God realm in their future lives. So kind of a lot of similarities between their views and the views of Christians and Jews and Muslims and so on. And but still, we don't find mention of help, how a bodhisattva helps those kinds of people. But I was thinking, my own guess is that these goals of having a fortunate rebirth are temporary goals from the point of view of Buddhism. They still fall within samsara. Wanting to have a good rebirth, wanting to be born as a human being, or wanting to be born as a god in one's next life. This is still within samsara. This is like a samsaric goal, and doesn't lie beyond samsara. So according to Buddhism, that's kind of a minor goal and just a temporary goal rather than an ultimate or long-term goal. Whereas in Buddhism talks about attaining liberation from samsara, not just good rebirths, but getting out of samsara. Mm-hmm. So that's, a very important goal. Let's stop this cycling in samsara. And so hearers and solitary realizers have that as their goal. They want to get out of samsara. So that's like a really important goal. And a bodhisattva does need to know how to lead them out of samsara. And then, of course, the bodhisattva's goal is even further than that. It's full enlightenment, Buddhahood. Okay, so again, that's a really important goal. And I'm sure that the bodhisattvas do want to help all living beings, and not just Buddhists, not just those who are following one of the 3 Buddhist paths. So of course they would help those who believe in God and those who wish to attain, a good rebirth in heaven or whatever in their future lives. So they would teach them how to practice virtue, how to refrain from non-virtue, how to create the causes for fortunate rebirth. So it's definite that bodhisattvas would help people who have that kind of goal to reach their goals. So, for example, we can see His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and he often meets with people of other religions, and they have interfaith dialogues, and he shows tremendous respect, genuine respect for all these other religions, and really encourages the followers of those religions to follow those religions, to practice them, be good people, practice kindness and compassion, and so on. So that's just how I came to an answer for myself for that question, in case anyone else has that question as well. Yeah, so here in this context, it's mainly talking about how a bodhisattva helps those who have a ultimate goal, like liberation from samsara and enlightenment, full enlightenment. But definitely bodhisattvas would help those with other goals as well, more temporal or worldly goals. Okay, so just to go through these 11 briefly. The first one is called Branches of a Knower of Paths. And this is actually talking about excellent qualities that are either a cause of a knower of path or a result of a knower of path. We will go into a little bit of detail with one of those after a while. Number 2 is knower of paths, knowing hearer's paths. So this is a bodhisattva's or Buddha's realization that knows the paths of hearers so that they can guide hearers to their goal of nirvana. The main hearer's path is the wisdom realizing selflessness of persons. So according to this school, that's what a hearer needs to meditate on and realize to attain their goal. They need to realize selflessness of person. There's no self-sufficient, self-supporting, substantially existent person. So a bodhisattva needs to meditate on that and realize that as well. And then number 3, knower of paths, knowing solitary realizer's paths. So again, this would be a realization in the mind of a bodhisattva Arya or a Buddha Arya that knows solitary realizer's paths. And the main path for solitary realizers is non-duality. That's a simple term, but the longer term is the emptiness of subject and object being of different natures, different entities. So that's what solitary realizers meditate on to attain their goal of solitary realizer enlightenment. And then number 4 is Mahayana Path of Seeing, which we've seen before. And this is the Bodhisattva's first direct realization of emptiness. And yeah, we'll look at a few more details about that a bit later. Number 5 is called the function of a Mahayana Path of meditation. And this includes beneficial qualities that are attained as a result of cultivating the path of meditation. We haven't gone into too much detail so far about the path of meditation. That will come later, but yeah, this is just talking about the benefits. If you do cultivate the Mahayana path of meditation, you'll get certain benefits as a result of that. So we'll look at a few of those later. So actually, from 5 on, topic 5 to topic 11, these are all related to the Mahayana path of meditation in some way or another. So number 6 is called Mahayana Path of Meditation of Belief. And these are, this is a conceptual clear realization of a bodhisattva on the Mahayana path of meditation that is convinced that the 3 mothers, and this refers to the 3 main perfection of wisdom sutras, the 100,000 verse, the 25,000 verse, and the 8,000 verse. Those are called the 3 mothers perfection of wisdom sutras. So here a bodhisattva is convinced that these 3 mother sutras are the source of attaining one's own and others' welfare or goals or aims. So it's mainly about faith or belief in the 3 mothers. And then number 7 is benefits of the Mahayana path of meditation of belief. So if you cultivate number 6, the Mahayana path of meditation of belief, you will get some benefits. Those are mentioned in number 7. And then number 8 is called the Mahayana path, path of meditation of dedication. And so this is again part of the path of meditation, but it's related to dedication of merits, dedication of all the merits that one accumulates to enlightenment, to becoming fully enlightened, to help all living beings. I'll give a little bit more detail of each of these. I'm just giving an overview of all 11, but then we'll go through them one by one. And then number 9, path of meditation of rejoicing. So this is also a part of the path of meditation in which one feels very joyful about one's virtue, the virtue that one is creating, as well as the virtue of others. So it's about the practice of rejoicing in virtue. And then the last two, path of meditation of achieving and path of meditation of purity. These are non-conceptual realizations in the mind of a bodhisattva Arya. And they establish, the first one, achieving, establishes the final realizations of a Buddha. And the second one, purity, establishes the final abandonment of a Buddha. So they often talk about those two aspects of a Buddha, the Buddha's realizations, all the realizations a Buddha has attained, and also the abandonment, all the things a Buddha has abandoned, which is everything, all the faults and stains and obscurations, been totally abandoned. Okay, so that's just a brief overview. The first one, the branches of a knower of paths, has 5 divisions. And one of these 5 divisions is called Awakening the Mahayana Lineage. I did mention that before. Mahayana lineage is a term for the kind of the inclination or predisposition to follow the Mahayana path to enlightenment. And it's said that this lineage is awakened when you generate great compassion. So when a person generates great compassion for all sentient beings without exception, and wanting to help all of those beings be free of suffering, and actually feeling a kind of commitment to doing that. So that's the point at which Mahayana lineage is awakened. And so in the context of that particular point about awakening the Mahayana lineage, there's a discussion about whether there are 3 final vehicles or only 1 final vehicle. And this is there's debate about this among the various Buddhist schools. So I just thought to go into a little bit of detail about that. So the meaning of 3, saying there are 3 final vehicles, means that the 3 vehicles are those of the hearers, solitary realizers, and the bodhisattva vehicle. So saying 3 final vehicles means each of those 3 types of persons follows their goal, follows their path and reaches their goal, and they stop there. That's it. They don't go further. Whereas saying there's 1 final vehicle means that some practitioners start off as hearers and they follow the hearer path to nirvana, hearers, enlightenment. And then there are some who are solitary realizers and they follow their path and reach their goal of hearers, nirvana. But then they switch. It's said that the Buddhas sort of arouse them from their blissful meditation in nirvana and lets them know that they have more work to do, and then leads them into the Mahayana path. So then they enter the Mahayana path and follow the Mahayana path and become Buddhas. That means everybody eventually follows the Mahayana path and becomes a Buddha. So there's 1 final vehicle. So, but not everybody agrees with that. So just to give a bit more information, which schools believe what and why. They all have their reasons for what they believe. So we'll start with 3 final vehicles. So the schools that believe in this, or that assert this, are the Vaibhashikas, the Sautrantikas, and Chittamatra followers of scripture. So those are the ones who say there's just 3 final vehicles. And the Vaibhashikas and Sautrantikas, you probably remember this if you study tenets, they believe that when somebody becomes an arhat, when they attain nirvana, a hearer or a solitary realizer, they follow their path and eventually become an arhat. And while they're still in their body, then they continue to exist. But when they come to the end of their life and die, leave their body, at that time, their mind goes out of existence. Their mental continuum ceases. There's no more mind, no more arhat. They just totally go out of existence. And therefore, they're not going to enter the Mahayana. There's nothing to enter the Mahayana vehicle because they're gone. So that's their view, and that's why they, believe in 3 final vehicles. Now, the Chittamatra followers of scripture, they have a bit more to say about this. So their belief is partly based on scripture, mainly the Sutra Unraveling the Thought. This is this Samdi Nimochana Sutra. And so in this sutra, the Buddha does talk about 3 final vehicles. So 3 types of practitioners travel their path, reach their goal, and then that's it. So they point to that scripture as a scriptural basis for their view. And they also have reasons. Okay, so the reason is that according to them, lineage, so lineage is another word for nature, like Buddha nature. It's like the potential in sentient beings' minds to be able to achieve some goal, like enlightenment or nirvana. And so what they say is the lineage is an uncontaminated seed in sentient beings' minds. So that's what they point to as being the lineage. And it's an other-powered nature, meaning it's an impermanent phenomena. Okay. And they say that other-powered natures, impermanent phenomena, are truly existing, ultimately existing. And therefore, it's something definite, something fixed that can't be altered, it can't be changed. So certain persons have the hearer lineage. It's this uncontaminated seed in their mind, and it's an impermanent phenomena. It's truly existing, ultimately existing, and it's kind of fixed and definite. So it can't be changed to some other kind of lineage, like a bodhisattva lineage. So that's what it says in my notes. But then I was looking at Meditation on Emptiness, Jeffrey Hopkins' book, Meditation on Emptiness, and he has a little bit more information. Because there's often many views about things, different scholars have different views, different assertions. So not everybody necessarily agrees. You have to get used to that with Tibetan Buddhism. One person says this, but somebody else says that. And so he says that this particular group of Chittamatra followers of scripture, these are the ones who follow Asanga's texts. And he says that these Chittamatrans do not say that an arhat goes out of existence. So they don't have the view that when an arhat, passes into nirvana without remainder or dies, that they go out of existence. They don't say that. And they have different views. They say there are some hearer arhats, when they attain nirvana without remainder, they are reborn in a lotus in a pure land, and they remain forever in a in a blissful meditative absorption in a state of peace. So they don't go out of existence, but they stay in this lotus and Pure Land forever and ever and ever. And they never enter the Mahayana Path. So those hearers are said to be of definite lineage. Their lineage is definite, and they're not going to switch over to the Mahayana Path. But there are other hearers who have an indefinite lineage, whose lineage is indefinite. And so even after attaining nirvana, then they will later enter the Mahayana Path, switch to the Mahayana Path and follow that path and become Buddhas. So this is a little bit more varied interpretation of what the Chittamatra followers of scripture say. But anyway, they do, at least they do say that there are some hearers and probably also some solitary realizers who never enter the Mahayana Path. And so for them, there would just be final vehicles, 3 final vehicles. That makes sense? Okay, then there's other schools who assert 1 final vehicle. So these are Chittamatra followers of reasoning. Those are the ones who follow Dharmakirti and Dignaga, their texts. And the Madhyamaka Svatantrikas and Madhyamaka Prasangikas. So all the Madhyamaka schools plus 1 type of Chittamatra. They say there's 1 final vehicle. And they have sutras that they refer to. The Descent into Lanka Sutra, Lankavatara Sutra, the White Lotus Sutra. I think that's probably the same as the Lotus Sutra. And another called the Srimala Devi Sutra. So those are some of the sutras they refer to. And in those sutras, the Buddha said there's just 1 final vehicle. And one of the sutras actually says, it mentions 5 faults that Buddhas would have if they taught the Mahayana Path only to some disciples. So if there was, 3 final vehicles and Buddha taught Mahayana only to some disciples, then that would be really strange. It would mean that the Buddha's compassion was limited. They're only teaching Mahayana to some and not to everybody. It means they have limited compassion and that they would be biased and they would be miserly with the Dharma. So if the Buddhists didn't teach Mahayana to everybody, there'd be these faults. And that just doesn't make sense. So this is actually what it says in one of these sutras. And so these schools are aware that the Buddha did explain 3 final vehicles in some of his sutras. So they do know about that, but they say this is an example of Buddha's skillful means. And there's an analogy. I think this actually comes in one of the sutras. The analogy is a captain of a ship who emanates a beautiful island, a very beautiful island with all kinds of pleasant, things to enjoy as a resting place for weary travelers on a long journey. Okay, so this ship captain is transporting people for a really, really, really long way, and they're getting weary. So this captain has the ability to create this beautiful island partway along the journey where the people can go and enjoy themselves and have a break from this long journey. So that's the analogy, and that refers to how the Buddha taught the 2 types of nirvana, the hearer's nirvana and the solitary realizer's nirvana, as a resting place for those who are tired after their long journey out of samsara, but are not yet ready to enter the Mahayana. So that's how they explain why the Buddha sometimes taught 3 final vehicles. He taught, the attainment of nirvana, hearer's nirvana, solitary realizer's nirvana, for some people who needed a place a break. They needed a place to rest for a while before they continued their journey on to full enlightenment. And so they would say that that kind of teaching, where the Buddha spoke of 3 final vehicles, is not to be taken literally. It's a provisional teaching. And the reason, okay, they also have reasoning for saying there's one final vehicle. So the main reason is the conception of true existence, which apprehends reality in a wrong way, can be eliminated, and sentient beings' defilements can be overcome. So the conception of true existence is what prevents us from attaining Buddhahood, enlightenment. That's the main obstacle, the main obscuration to attaining enlightenment. And this conception can be eliminated. It's not a fixed, permanent part of the mind. And so we can learn the antidote, the wisdom, realizing emptiness of true existence. That can be learned. And so we can develop that wisdom and we can overcome the conception of true existence and all the other defilements that are based on that. Yeah, and in another place in this explanation, it gave 3 reasons proving that all sentient beings will attain Buddhahood. One reason is that sentient beings' minds are not truly existent. And this can be established by valid cognition. So we can have a valid realization that sentient beings' minds are empty of true existence. That's one reason. The second is that the stains, like all the afflictions, the conception of true existence, and so on, these are adventitious. They are not fixed, permanent parts of the mind, but can be eliminated. And number 3 is these stains have not entered the nature of the mind. They're not kind of inherently, permanently stuck in the mind. So they can be overcome and eliminated. So for those reasons, then every sentient being has the ability, the potential, possibility of attaining Buddhahood. And on top of that, the Buddha has great compassion. I mean, there's many Buddhas, and all these Buddhas have great compassion for all sentient beings and want to bring all sentient beings to Buddhahood and are committed to that, or, determined that they will do that they will bring all sentient beings to enlightenment. So for those reasons, then there's one final vehicle. Every sentient being eventually will reach full enlightenment. Okay, that's something related to the first topic, branches of a knower path. The second topic is knower paths, knowing hearers paths. So the definition of this is a Mahayana. Oh no, sorry, this isn't a definition. This is a description. A description of that. It's a Mahayana Arya's exalted wisdom. So it's realization in their mind. And it's conjoined with 3 things: bodhicitta, dedication, and the wisdom realizing emptiness. So bodhicitta we are familiar with. And dedication here means that they dedicate, bodhisattvas dedicate all the merit they create to the attainment of Buddhahood to be able to benefit all living beings. And then the wisdom realizing emptiness, which we're familiar with as well. And so this exalted wisdom is conjoined with those 3 things, assisted by those 3 things. And it directly realizes the 16 aspects of the 4 noble truths. So these are the main objects that a hearer will learn and meditate on and gain a realization of. And So each of the Four Noble Truths has 4 aspects. I won't go into all of them, partly because I don't remember all of them. But the first Noble Truth is true sufferings, and the 4 aspects of that, these are easy to remember: impermanence, suffering, empty, and selfless. So those are all terms we're relatively familiar with. So these are 4 aspects of true suffering. And an example of true suffering would be our aggregates, our body and mind, which are contaminated. They come into existence from karma and afflictions. And so, yeah, they're like completely in the nature of suffering and like magnets for suffering, attracting suffering to ourselves. And so here, but not just here, is bodhisattvas also need to meditate on these 4 aspects of true suffering. So, for example, our aggregates of body and mind, the first aspect is impermanence. So our body and mind are impermanent. They arise from causes and conditions, and they're changing moment by moment. And so it's actually a very powerful meditation to meditate on, because we don't normally see things as impermanent. We tend to see our body and mind and everything else as fixed and permanent. And that's why we get so surprised and shocked when some kind of change happens, like somebody dies or gets an injury or falls into depression. We tend to think things should remain the same. They shouldn't change. But if we were more familiar with impermanence, we wouldn't be so surprised and shocked when changes do happen. So meditating on the impermanent nature of the aggregates. And then number 2 is suffering. So our aggregates are suffering because they're under the control of karma and affliction. So our aggregates themselves and all the experiences that we have with our body and mind, these are all the result of karma and afflictions, ignorance, greed, hatred, and so on. And so naturally, they're in the nature of suffering, not just gross suffering, but the suffering of change and then pervasive suffering, just being stuck with karma and afflictions. It is itself suffering, being stuck in samsara. So Bodhisattva meditates on that as well. And then number 3, empty. There's different ways of explaining number 3 and 4, but a simple way is empty means empty of a permanent, unitary, independent self. So that's the kind of self that the non-Buddhists believe in. Atman or soul, something that's permanent, unitary, not with parts, and then independent of causes and conditions. So that kind of self is not existing. So bodhisattvas meditate on that. And then selfless, the 4th one, is the more subtle kind of selflessness, empty of a self-sufficient, substantially existent self. So again, that's the main object hearers need to meditate on to attain their goal of nirvana. So bodhisattvas then meditate on these 4 aspects of true suffering, and they do so when they are meditating on these and realizing these. They do it with those 3 attributes mentioned in the definition: bodhicitta, dedication, and the wisdom realizing emptiness. And so even though both the bodhisattva and a hearer are meditating on these same 4 aspects of true suffering, impermanence, and so forth, they're doing it in a different way, because the bodhisattvas are doing it with bodhicitta. That's their motivation for doing this meditation. And they're dedicating all the merit they create to enlightenment. And they have the wisdom realizing emptiness of true existence. So when a hearer is meditating on these aspects of true suffering. They're not doing it with bodhicitta, dedicating their merit to enlightenment and so on. And so there's a difference between when a bodhisattva is meditating on these and when a hearer is meditating on them. But still, the point here is that bodhisattva does need to meditate on and realize these same paths, these same meditation objects as the hearers, to be able to help them, to be able to help hearers reach their goal. Okay, then next one, the third topic is similar, but with regard to the solitary realizer's path. So again, a knower of paths, knowing solitary realizer's path. So this is in the mind of a bodhisattva or a Buddha, Arya. So a general description of this, it's a Mahayana Arya's exalted wisdom, and it's conjoined with those three attributes mentioned before: bodhicitta, dedication and the wisdom, realizing emptiness. And it directly realizes emptiness of duality. So emptiness of duality is, a simple way of talking about this emptiness of subject and object, like a mind and its object being of different natures, different entities. Like the Chittamatras, what they describe as emptiness. And so this is the main meditation object for solitary realizers, the main thing that they meditate on to attain their goal. And in the explanation of this topic, there's information about solitary realizers. So I thought to share a bit of that, because you don't hear much about solitary realizers. And I'm not sure there are even anymore in the world, if we can actually find people who are solitary realizers. So just some of the features of solitary realizers. They're said to be, they prefer solitude. They prefer to be by themselves. They don't like crowds and distractions. They like peace and quiet. And they're said to have less compassion than bodhisattvas. So it's not that they have no compassion. They do have some compassion, but not as much as bodhisattvas. So they don't have the ability to take on the responsibility of helping all sentient beings, becoming fully enlightened Buddhas to help all sentient beings. And it's also said they are of middling faculties. So it's said that hearers are dull faculty, bodhisattvas are sharp faculty, and solitary realizers fall in the middle. And the term faculty, we might think it means intelligence. It has something to do with intelligence. But my teachers said, no, it doesn't. It's not a question of intelligence, but it's a question of mental strength, having, determination, strong mind. So bodhisattva has the strongest mind. I mean, you have to be willing to spend 3 countless great eons following the path. And then hearers' mental strength is weaker. They spend a minimum of 3 lives to reach their goal. And then solitary realizers are in the middle, because they usually spend about 100 eons following their path in order to reach their goal. So they kind of in the middle. And then the next bullet point says they pray to be reborn in their last life where there's no supreme nirmanakaya. So supreme nirmanakaya, or the nirmanakaya is the form body of a Buddha, and there's different kinds of nirmanakaya. One is called a supreme nirmanakaya, and Shakyamuni Buddha Shakyamuni was an example of that. The supreme nirmanakaya comes into the world to teach the Dharma, turn the wheel of Dharma at a time when there are sentient beings ready to hear the Dharma. So the solitary realizers want in their last life, meaning the last life when they attain their goal, it's called enlightenment, but it's solitary realizers enlightenment. So they want to be born in a time and in a place where there's no supreme Nirmanakaya. I'm not completely sure why. We had some discussion about this in our class, but our teacher didn't really know either. But anyway, that's said to be something they pray for. And also the second is they want to attain enlightenment without relying on a master. So, you know, in their earlier lives, in the beginning, when they start practicing, they rely on teachers. They listen to teachers and practice under a teacher. But in that last life, when they attain their goal, they want to do so without having a teacher. By that time, of course, they, you know, very highly attained. They don't need a teacher, but that's just some specific prayer that they make. And then the third one is to teach the Dharma without speaking. So that's something else that they wish to do. When they do attain their goal of enlightenment, they want to teach without speaking. And there was some discussion in our text about how do you do that? How do you teach Dharma without any words? And so let's see, what does it say here? Yeah, because the real meaning of teaching Dharma is causing realizations to arise in the minds of listeners. And it is possible to do that without using words, without making sound. And the solitary realizers are able to do that because of prayers. They make prayers to be able to do that. So they spend many lifetimes, hundreds of eons, working for their goal, and they're making this prayer. I want to teach Dharma without words. And so because of that prayer they make, then they're able to do it. And it reminds me, there's this story in the Zen tradition of a time when the Buddha gave a teaching just by holding up a flower. He just didn't say anything, but just held up a flower. And one of the disciples, Mahakasyapa, gained the realization. He gained the wisdom realizing suchness or emptiness by the Buddha holding up a flower. So that's in the Zen tradition. So that's an example of teaching Dharma without words, without speaking. So it is possible. And another thing about solitary realizers is that they abandon the coarse obstructions to omniscience, or coarse knowledge obstruction. So we did talk about that before. Hearers abandon afflictive obscurations, which are mainly conception of a self of person, self-sufficient, substantially existent person, and all the afflictions, anger, attachment that arise from that. So those are the main obstructions that prevent liberation, that keep us in samsara. So a hearer has abandoned those. They're free of those. But they haven't abandoned any obstructions to omniscience. They still have those. And they're, according to this school, this is, I think, the only school that mentions this, there's two levels of obstructions to omniscience. There's the coarse and the subtle. So the coarse obstructions to omniscience are the conception of duality, believing that subject and object are of different natures. So that's a mistaken conception. And that is a coarse obstruction to omniscience. So solitary realizers, that's their main meditation object. They meditate on the emptiness of subject and object being of different natures. And they realize that. And with that realization, they're able to abandon the coarse obstructions to omniscience. And so that makes them superior to hearers, because hearers haven't abandoned those particular obstructions. They still have in their mind that conception of subject and object being different substances, different natures. So there's a difference in the wisdom of hearers and solitary realizers, but that's only according to this school, according to Yogacara, Svatantrika Madhyamaka. The other schools wouldn't say that. They also spend more time on the path. So solitary realizers spend at least 100 eons accumulating merit on their way to their goal. So for those reasons, because they've abandoned more obstructions and they have more merit, then they have greater wisdom than the hearers. Okay, let's see, we can do a few more. So then the fourth topic is the path of seeing, Mahayana path of seeing. And we did learn some things about the path of seeing already. One of our previous classes, like, went through the different divisions of the path of seeing, like the exalted wisdom of meditative equipoise, where the Bodhisattva is in meditation, directly realizing emptiness. Then there's subsequent attainment. So when they're out of meditation and they still have exalted wisdom while they're going about their Bodhisattva deeds. And then there was also an exalted wisdom, which is neither of those two. So that's something we looked at before. Now, in this chapter, in chapter 2, there's more divisions of the path of seeing. I won't go into them, but just mention them. Something called the 16 instants of the path of seeing. This is very complicated, so we're going to skip over that. But maybe one day you'll have the chance to study the Ornament, and then you'll learn more about those 16 instants, or moments, 16 moments. But here is something that's a little more easy to understand. The supports of the path of seeing. So the meaning of support is, another translation could be basis. So it means the kind of body you have to have and the kind of mind you have to be able to attain the path of seeing. So this is useful. One day we want to attain the path of seeing. So it's important to know where we have to be, what kind of body we have to have, and also what kind of mind we have to attain the path of seeing. And so this isn't a question of discrimination. So don't think that Buddhists are discriminating against certain people or certain beings. But it's just a question that the path of seeing is a very high realization. It's an incredible state of mind. And so you need to have the right kind of circumstances, both physical and mental, for your mind to be able to attain that very high realization. And everybody eventually will attain the path of seeing. We're all going to be Buddhas one day, and the path of seeing is one point along the way that we have to go through. So one day we will all attain the path of seeing, but you still need a certain kind of life and circumstances to be able to attain that. So the first is the physical support, or the body, the kind of body you need. And so it says men and women of 3 continents, excluding the northern one. So you're probably familiar with the mandala offering. When we make the mandala offering, there's the 4 continents. These are human worlds. We're said to be in the southern continent. And there's 3 other continents where there are human beings. And the northern one is excluded here because it said that the northern one, which is called unpleasant sound, Dami Nyen, I think in Tibetan, the northern continent, the human beings there are very distracted. Their minds are, if we think our minds are distracted, apparently theirs are even more distracted. And so it's very difficult for them to attain meditative absorption, to focus their minds, concentrate their minds. So human beings in the northern continent are not able to attain the path of seeing. It's also mentioned in the text that even in the other 3 continents, human beings who are hermaphrodites, and that apparently means you have two sexual organs, both male and female sexual organs, and also neuters, those who have no sexual organs, that such people are also not able to attain the path of seeing. The reason given is because they have strong jealousy, because they're not able to engage in sexual intercourse. And so they're very jealous of those who can. So this strong jealousy apparently disturbs their mind such that they're not able to focus and attain the path of seeing. But I'm wondering if that is really a definite thing, especially in this day and age where you can have surgery and you can have other kinds of methods that you may be able to take care of these problems. But anyway, it's in the text, so I'm just passing it on. And then in addition to human beings of 3 continents, then desire realm gods. So there's many different gods or devas, and some are in the desire realm. There's six levels of desire realm gods. And so they are also able to attain the path of seeing. So those are the only places where beings can attain the path of seeing. Now the 3 lower realms, animals and hungry ghosts and hell beings, they have too much suffering. It would just be too hard for them to concentrate their mind and gain a direct realization of emptiness. And then there's the gods in the form and the formless realm, we looked at last week. And those gods are also not able to attain the path of seeing because they have too much pleasure. They have too much bliss. Their meditative experiences are just so blissful that it's very hard for them to generate renunciation of samsara, to see the faults of samsara and desire to become free of samsara. And so they are not able to attain the path of seeing. Then the mental support, the state of mind one needs to have to attain the path of seeing, is an actual concentration. So we looked at that last week, like the 4 concentrations, the first, second, third, and fourth concentrations, and how those are attained. You first have to attain calm abiding and then go through the 7 preparations for each of the concentrations. So the concentrations are super strong, stable, meditative states. And so if you have one of those, you need to have one of those, at least the first one, to have the stability of mind to be able to attain the path of seeing. And it said that bodhisattvas, I mentioned this last time, bodhisattvas who are following the sutra path to enlightenment have to develop all 4 of the concentrations and the 4 formless absorptions. And it said that they do attain all the 4 concentrations by the time they reach the path of preparation. So while they're on the path of preparation, just before the path of seeing, they definitely have all 4 of those concentrations. So it's not a problem for them to have that mental support. So those are the physical and mental supports to be able to attain the path of seeing. And then another 2 divisions, this is something I found interesting when I was studying it, 2 divisions of the path of seeing. One is called the path of seeing that acts to pass through, and the second is the path of seeing that is to be passed through. So the path of seeing that acts to pass through is the path of seeing that directly realizes the emptiness of true existence. So that's what we normally know as the path of seeing, the wisdom directly realizing emptiness of true existence. So that's the first of the 2 paths of seeing here. And the second one, the path of seeing that is to be passed through, there's different versions of this or different types of this. It includes the direct realizations of impermanence, of selflessness of persons, emptiness of a self-sufficient, substantially existent person, and non-duality, emptiness of duality. So those are other realizations a bodhisattva needs to develop, as we've talked about. Those are the main meditations of hearers and solitary realizers to attain their goals. But a bodhisattva needs to meditate on those and gain the realization of those as well, right? So I hope you remember that. We've gone through that many times. So Bodhisattva's main meditation object is emptiness of true existence. That's the one they mainly put their time and energy into, because that's what they need to realize to reach their goal of enlightenment. But as we have seen, they do also have to meditate on other things like impermanence and selflessness of persons, non-duality. They need to do that to be able to help other beings like the hearers and the solitary realizers. And so they will spend some of their time first developing a conceptual understanding of those topics, and then continue meditating. And at some point, they'll gain the direct realization of impermanence, direct realization of selflessness in persons, and so on. So then the question is, when do they do that? When do they gain the direct realizations of those topics? Do they do that before the path of seeing, or after the path of seeing, or during the path of seeing? So the answer to this is quite interesting. I found it interesting. So again, the path of seeing is attained when a bodhisattva is in a state of meditation. So before the path of seeing, they're on the path of preparation. And they've already gained the realization of emptiness, but it's still a conceptual realization of emptiness with a conceptual image. It's not a direct realization of emptiness. So when they transfer from the path of preparation to the path of seeing, they're in meditation. So they're sitting and meditating, and their mind is focused on emptiness. They're meditating on emptiness. And they reach that point where the last trace of the conceptual image disappears, and they gain the direct non-conceptual realization of emptiness. And that's the moment when they attain the path of seeing. And so they're only focused on emptiness. The only thing appearing to their mind at that time is emptiness. But as we've seen, I've mentioned, my teachers say, in their mind, they do have other realizations, other states of mind, like bodhicitta, compassion, and so on. But they also have these other realizations. They have realization of impermanence, realization of selflessness of persons, because they've been meditating on those for a long time. And they're not yet direct realizations. They're still conceptual realizations. But when the bodhisattva attains the path of seeing, by gaining the direct non-conceptual realization of emptiness, those other conceptual realizations in their mind that are in a non-manifest state at that point, they transform into direct realizations. So it's kind of a side effect of the path of seeing. When they gain the direct realization of emptiness in a manifest way, that's what's manifest in their mind at that time. These other non-manifest realizations they have, they also transform into direct realizations. So that's the meaning of this second type of path of seeing, the path of seeing that is to be passed through. I don't know why it's called that. There's probably some reason why they use that terminology, but this is what it's referring to. So I thought that was really interesting, really cool. Does that make sense? So, yeah, I had prepared more material, but maybe it's a good point to stop there, because the remaining topics of chapter 2, 5 to 11, these are all related to the path of meditation, So maybe we can leave those for next time, next week. I'm not going to go into much detail with them, but just to give a little bit more information. Any questions? Any questions anyone might have? Steve?
Thank you very much, Venerable. So I'm just catching up with you here on that very interesting description of the path of seeing that is to be passed through. And I just had like one minor qualm. Why couldn't you have a direct realization of impermanence, for example, before you entered the path of seeing?
It's a good question, and there's probably an answer to it. I just don't know what the answer is. I'll try to find in my notes if I have an answer to that. But yeah, I think that there is a reason why a bodhisattva cannot have a direct realization of another object like impermanence or selflessness of persons before the path of seeing. There must be a reason. I'll try to find it.
Well, thank you very much, Venerable. And otherwise, that explanation made sense. I was thinking about the analogy you used about the taste of emptiness of all phenomena. You might have a basis of one particular item that you use to generate a direct realization of emptiness, but you actually realize the emptiness of all phenomena, just like a grain of sugar, one grain of sugar tastes like any other grain of sugar. So that certainly made sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I presume that might be part of the reason why in the path of seeing, when you have that direct realization of emptiness, you're also having the same taste as a direct realization of impermanence, empty of being permanent, empty of self, empty of non-duality, and so on.
I mean, I was thinking more also of a hearer, for example. There's the hearer's path of seeing, and the hearer's path of seeing would be when they gain the direct realization of selflessness of persons. So for a hearer, the direct realization of selflessness of persons marks the beginning of the path of seeing for them. And I'm just wondering if a bodhisattva were to attain the direct realization of selflessness of persons before they attain the direct realization of emptiness, then does that mean they've attained the hearer's path of seeing? Would you say that's the hearer's path of seeing? You know what I'm saying? Because normally the direct realization of selflessness of persons marks the beginning of the hearer's path of seeing. So might be, I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but that's just something that pops up into my mind.
Yeah, and Venerable, and that kind of brings back I don't know if I can even formulate the question yet. I'm going to have to re-listen to your instruction, but it has to do with, I guess we'll say the Prasangika reasoning for one single vehicle. And I'm just wondering, does it even have anything to do with the realization of emptiness of true existence? Because isn't that common to the other paths? And so therefore the uncommon cause of Buddhahood is bodhicitta. So shouldn't the realization, or shouldn't the reasoning for one single vehicle have to touch on the fact that there's the uncontrived bodhicitta that puts us on the Mahayana path, and that can be regenerated even if you attain a hearer or a solitary realizer's final nirvana? I don't know if that made any sense, and if it doesn't, it's all right. I'll think about it and maybe come up with a better question.
But speaking of Prasangika, according to Prasangika, all three types of persons, hearers, solitary realizers, and bodhisattvas, all have to realize emptiness of true existence, or emptiness of inherent existence, to be able to attain their goals. Okay, so they don't have, like in this school, Yogacara Svatantrika, they have three different things they're meditating on, 3 different realizations they attain to attain their goals. Not like that in Prasangika. It's much more simple. Everybody has to meditate on and gain the realization of emptiness of true existence in order to attain the path of seeing of their particular vehicle and to attain their final goal of nirvana. So meditating on just selflessness of persons isn't enough, even for a hearer, to be able to attain their goal.
Right, right.
It's so complicated. All these different schools, but yeah, this particular school is particularly complicated because of these 3 different practitioners following the 3 different vehicles and having 3 different kinds of meditation objects and 3 different kinds of obscurations that they overcome. It's much more simple. Yeah. Anyone else?
Rashika, you had a question earlier. Do you still have that question in your mind?
Oh, no, it was answered. Thank you so much.
Okay, all right then.
But I'm just thinking, the gentleman, Stephen, he was talking about needing bodhicitta along that path. I'm just trying to make sure I understand what he's saying. I know there are some stages at which bodhicitta can be lost. Like, I don't know, is it when you reach the bodhisattva state is where now uncontrived is like the basis, like the starting point? He was I just want to make sure I understand what he was, as much as I possibly can. I just kind of want to understand exactly what he was trying to hit at.
Well, what you're talking
If
about,
my question did make sense.
losing bodhicitta, they do say that, yeah, the first time you generate bodhicitta, uncontrived bodhicitta, that's the beginning of the path of accumulation. And the path of accumulation, that's the first of the 5 paths, has 3 levels: small, middle, and great. And so when you're still on the small level of the path of accumulation, your bodhicitta is still kind of fragile and vulnerable. You can still lose it. I don't know how often that happens, but they say it does happen. But when you reach
But
the
I know
middle,
it's at the middle point.
middle point, yeah, the middle level of the path of accumulation, they say from that time on, your bodhicitta is strong and stable and can't be lost. So yeah, with hearers and solitary realizers, those who say there's one final vehicle. So after they attain their goal of arhat, becoming an arhat, when they enter the Mahayana path, they have to start at the beginning. They have to first generate bodhicitta, enter the path of accumulation, and then follow the whole Mahayana path. I mean,
I
that's
kind of see why people don't want to enter that
huh?
path, knowing that. I can kind of see the reluctance to entering the Mahayana path, knowing all that. At first, I was like, why am I reluctant? But after this, I'm like, oh God, yeah. Well, oh Buddha.
And this is why they say, it's much better if we just start off on the Mahayana path from the beginning rather than taking that side trip. Much more efficient. Just generate bodhicitta, enter the Mahayana path. Don't go that way. It's more roundabout. It takes longer. It actually takes longer to reach enlightenment that way. So
Thanks.
Anybody here? No? Well, we can conclude here then with dedication prayers. So just feel a sense of joy, rejoicing that we spent this time listening to these teachings on the Bodhisattva's path from the Ornament for Clear Realization, that really precious text. And we did so with the bodhicitta motivation, wishing to follow that path and reach enlightenment, to to be able to help all sentient beings. So this has been a really good use of time. We've created a great deal of merit, positive energy. And the best thing we can do with this merit is share it with other sentient beings, wishing that it will be beneficial for them to meet the Dharma, particularly the Mahayana Dharma, Mahayana teachings, and generate bodhicitta, and generate all the other qualities and realization of the path, and eventually reach enlightenment. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. And then the long life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, incomparably kind and supreme Tenzin Gyatso, the wish-fulfilling, wish-granting jewel, source of every benefit and happiness in this world. May you have a long life and all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. And long life of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, you who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayers honoring the three sublime ones, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Venerable.